The thing we want to talk about today is kind of the state of PlayStation Studios. We're kind of poking around. Every week we have a couple meetings and we're like, what are we talking about this week? What's going on? What's exciting in the world of PlayStation? And in the last week, the two big sort of PlayStation related beats that happened kind of back to back, sort of hilariously, Neil Druckmann in an interview said, don't bet on there being a Last of Us Part 3. Just one of those fun little things to just sort of throw it. If there's an opposite of throwing fire on gasoline, which, that his games have definitely done to a certain amount, or the fans have reacted that way, it's just like, there was talk of like, yeah, we have some ideas for Last of Us Part 3. And he's like, yeah, don't bet on it. So that's, kind of anticlimactic. I'm excited for Intergalactic, but at the same time, it's weird to be like, the biggest news related to Last of Us is they're not doing another one for the immediate future. Yeah. The day after that, Sony announced that there's a brand new DualSense wireless controller themed after The Last of Us Part 2.
They had to move fast. They had to move fast after.
Yep, they're like, oh, we got to get these off. Go one off book. We got to get these out now.
I mean, it definitely looked like it was designed that night.
Yeah. I think it's fine.
Sorry.
I think it's fine. It's not one that I'm gonna buy personally, as much as I love Last of Us.
That's the meanest thing you could say about it, Jada. You love controllers and you love buying things.
You find the good in everything so much better than anyone I know, and you're like, it's fine.
I think it's got some cool little ideas in there. I don't think it is
those are called
perfectly
trophies.
Executed for the masses. I think it will do really well with sections of the Last of Us audience.
This is like the meanest stuff you could say about this controller coming from you. This is some of the most negative stuff I've ever heard out of your mouth, Joe. This is ridiculous.
Different groups. There's these groups of people that buy everything that is Last of Us. Those people are going to buy this controller.
Well, the good news is The Last of Us isn't completely, dormant like some other certain PlayStation properties. Like, we're going to get Last of Us season 2 of the show. Like, they're, keeping the lights on over there, which is cool. It's a drag. We're not going to get a new game for a cool minute, but also you can't blame Druckmann for wanting to step away and focus on something else, because he's basically been working on that for 12 plus years, 15 years,
I mean,
to be honest, this is kind of Naughty Dog MO though. If you look back at all of their franchises, minus Crash, who obviously got, auctioned off to another family, there is
that's such a horrible thing.
He got rehomed. He got rehomed. That's what you call it.
Not adoption.
He was adopted by somebody else. Sorry, my words. It's early. It's Tuesday.
PlayStation drove Crash Bandicoot out into the country, and they let him out of the car, and they were like, "Go on now, be free." And he just
fruits.
But okay, but to get to my actual
if he was a person, if he's half person, half animal, I guess. So I don't know if he was rehomed or like.
I mean, okay,
either way,
they do silent auctions for pets and stuff.
Okay, we're a little bit off the
silent auctions.
Is that? I don't know. I'm not wealthy. I've never tried to buy a Bandicoot. I've never tried to do that.
I try so hard to be like, speaking of this thing, that brings us to our next topic, and then we wind up talking about whether or not a Bandicoot gets auctioned because it wears pants. Like,
I think Crash Bandicoot would love a Segway. He would ride one of those. If he hasn't ridden one already, Max, I think he would be into it. No, but
to my point, the point I was getting at is Naughty Dog. This is kind of Naughty Dog's MO. With each of their franchises, they build up this mass following, and then they leave the fans wanting more as they move on to the next thing. They did it with Crash, and they went to Jak and Daxter. They did it with Jak and Daxter, and then they went to Uncharted. They did it with Uncharted, and they did it with Last of Us. And obviously, Uncharted kept going a little bit into the Last of Us lifespan, but that's kind of ended. And now we're at that same point with Last of Us, and we're moving into Intergalactic.
So I agree, but I feel like with Uncharted, like that one of all of them was the ones where they put that in a pretty neat little bow in terms of.
I agree.
I'm going to use like sort of broad generalizations here in terms of spoiler stuff for folks who haven't finished Uncharted 4. But like that one, it felt like they left it in a spot where you're like, okay, like there was a little open-endedness for a second there at the end, and then they were like, everything's fine, good to go. Please be excited for the future or whatever. But I didn't like, I thought that they left Nathan Drake in a place where I'm like, you could revisit this if you wanted to. His legs would probably hurt. You don't need to. Whereas The Last of Us Part 2, and again, broad strokes here to avoid spoilers, I think that what that did that's very interesting is that we are so used to video games getting constant sequels and reboots for decades now, to the point where like a character is always just left in a situation where you're like, okay, blah blah blah, we'll return for more adventures, right? Like the thing that they put in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, right? Like Star-Lord will return. I feel like they've always done that with, like Nathan Drake and Lara Croft and Mario and Sonic and all that.
This is the problem with having like realistic characters, is the more realistic they get, the less realistic a happy ending is. The Last of Us, it says it in the name. It's The Last of Us. It is about the decline of human life as we know it. Like, it's about society falling apart and people dying a whole lot. There's eventually, it's just, you're not really going to have like a nice ending to that. Even then, it's going to be like a weird sort of, well, we made the most of it. Like, what zombie movies have happy endings? Like, you got Shaun of the Dead, which is extremely warped. You get 28 days later, 28 weeks later, and then 28 years later. Like, there's just, again, there's a interview going around with Alex Garland, who wrote 28 Days Later and is directing 28. Danny Boyle's directing, whatever. He made a bunch of those 28 related movies. Talking to Neil Druckmann about just sort of their projects and their various bits of fiction, and it's like, these are guys who get how to tell a compelling story, and like a compelling story doesn't always give you what you want. Like, kill your darlings.
Yeah, I mean,
with sporting goods if necessary. Like, it's
okay with a tragic ending, or a one that doesn't leave your characters in the happiest place possible. Like that, it's actually why I love The Last of Us 2's ending so much, is because it hits you over the head thematically the entire time about the idea of revenge consuming you to the point of self-destruction. That is the overwhelming theme in that game, and it happens to both main characters, Ellie and Abby, and there's really no books or movies that tackle that exact theme specifically, where both characters just high five at the end and they go good to go, unless you're talking like maybe like Tom and Jerry, right? Like, or Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, and even then it's just like one of them is just like, well, that's all, folks. Like, it's never really like we're gonna just ride off into the sunset.
The question that I have is, what would we, and I asked myself this, what would I even want from a Last of Us Part 3?
Yeah.
Like, we heard Druckmann say, I think it was sometime last year, he was doing like press junkets. He mentioned how like he has an outline for Part 3. And now, fast forward to just last week, he says, no, don't bet on it happening. He had an outline. So it's not like he had it like fully drafted or figured out in his head what a Part 3 would look like. But it's like, again, like someone who played both games, I'm like, I don't even know what I would want in a Part 3. Do I want the character? Do I want Abby and Ellie to return? Do I want to see their story play out?
Here's the thing, like, a couple things changed in between Crash Bandicoot and The Last of Us, and one of them is, as you were talking about earlier, like, games are harder to make. They take longer to make. They're more expensive to make. The other thing that happened specifically under this sort of umbrella is that games started getting adapted into movies successfully. Like, we got an Uncharted movie, which was a hit. We're probably going to see another Uncharted movie before we see another Uncharted game. That seems like a pretty safe bet. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that Last of Us outline made its way into Last of Us seasons 4 and 5, if they decide to do that.
Right.
I think that's a great way to get more mileage out of that show, rather than having like a one-to-one adaptation of what's going on. But the nice thing is that, like, The Last of Us intellectual property continues to exist, despite it being this very bleak petering out of human existence. Like, there's still some lead in that pencil in terms of telling stories in other mediums, and I don't how that pans out is anyone's guess. I'm excited about new stuff from Intergalactic. I think it's going to be really fun.